Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of Reddit Podcast Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. My girlfriend refuses to go after her baby daddy for child support because they're friends. After that, my wife keeps going to the movies with the man who lives next door and makes me babysit. And after that, am I the jerk for selling my house and not renewing the lease of a family with a sick kid? Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen doesn't get to go to the movies with the man who lives next door and make her husband babysit. We deserve a comment so much more than the dinosaurs did. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. My girlfriend refuses to go after her baby daddy for child support because they're friends. I met my girlfriend on Tinder and we were not exclusive to begin with. We get along great and I thought we had a future. She got pregnant and we were kind of excited to start a family. When the baby was born, it was very obviously not mine. I did not sign the birth certificate. I also did not break up with her, but I also told her that I would not be making myself financially responsible for the baby. We had planned for her to take a year off of work to be with the baby. She had already taken her maternity leave. I said she needed to go after the father for child support. She didn't want to because they were friends. I said I understood, but then she had to take full financial responsibility for the kid. I would help her with all of the child rearing, like changing diapers and feedings and the like, but not for paying for any of it. She agreed. She ran through her savings in about 6 months. She talked to me about helping with the baby formula and stuff, and I said no, that wasn't our agreement. She called him and asked for money, and he gave her a few $1,000s to pay for baby stuff, but told her not to contact him again. That is when she understood their friendship. So she went after him for child support. His fiance found out about the whole thing and is thinking of breaking things off. The child support is enough that the baby will be taken care of and will not affect our finances. He called her crying because we messed up his life. He said that I could easily afford to take care of them and that I'm being a jerk for dragging his life through the mud. She feels terrible about it and blames me for not just stepping up and considering her as a single mom. I love my girlfriend and the baby, and I have no problem raising the baby, but I don't think I should be held financially responsible when the father has resources and tried to evade responsibility. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. It's good that you're willing to be a family with your girlfriend and her baby, and according to you, you could afford to support them, but that does not absolve the biological father of responsibility for the maintenance of his kid. And what if, God forbid, something happened to you and you cannot afford it anymore? What happens then? If the biological dad had a few thousand available to give away like that, I'm guessing he can afford to as well. So the ruined part is of his own doing, since he lied to his fiance and hoped to forget the whole thing. OP, I can afford it, but yes, I think that the biological father has to support his kid. I actually plan to talk to my girlfriend about putting most of the child support into an investment fund for the kid's future, education or what have you. I will support our family, and the kid will have a great nest egg to start life. Not the jerk. He's the father. He should be responsible. However, if she's going through her finances without thinking about her responsibilities and she initially tried to pin the baby on you, is that not a red flag of potential issues that may crop up? Red flags. Proceed with caution, OP. I suspect you're in for a bumpy road ahead. I totally understand this guy fathered this kid and needs to step up, and the way you pressured your girlfriend to go to him, and you're not the jerk for that. But I'm kind of wondering where you're planning to go from here. If you're going to raise the kid as your own, and it sounds like you are, you can't realistically keep up the I'm not taking financial responsibility for it in the long run. Even legally speaking, in most countries, if you're dad, for all practical intents and purposes, even if you aren't on paper, you'll be asked to step up if necessary. You're the jerk. You sound just like my ex. He was willing to man up and financially support my twins until he heard through the grapevine that they might not be his. Well, this loser actually demanded a paternity test, and surprise, surprise, he wasn't the father. He flipped when he found out I had cheated on him, and the truth is, yes, I did cheat, but only because he was always trying to control me. If you ask me, controlling men deserve to be cheated on, and I have no regrets for the other guys that I was with. I have no idea which one was the actual father, and he kept trying to make me go after them for child support. Never gonna happen though, because most of them are my guy friends, and I don't want to damage that friendship. I feel so sorry for your girlfriend, and I hope she finds a real man who will step up and be a father to her baby, since you're obviously too selfish and delusional to be an actual man with your fragile little ego. Well, what do you think? Is OP the jerk or not? Please let us know. Remember back when people used to get married before having babies? Sometimes I feel like people these days are just so lost. It's okay, Karen. This next story should definitely help you regain your faith in humanity. My wife keeps going to the movies with the man who lives next door and makes me babysit. I'm 39, male. My wife, 34, female, and I live in a suburban house with our daughter, who's 10, Emily. Our neighbor next door, 48, male, is Walter. He's a single father with 2 daughters who are 14 and 12. We've been living here for a little more than 2 years. My wife really likes watching scary movies, but I never enjoy them. I get too scared and end up having a bad time, so I prefer to avoid them. Her friends sometimes go with her to the more popular ones, but she also likes older, indies, and foreign horror movies. She has always had a hard time finding people that have this niche interest, and that's why it was such a big deal when we met Walter and found out that he also shares this tendency. They very quickly started to make plans to watch movies together. I was invited to be a part of this, but I refused. I prefer to just stay at home babysitting Emily and Walter's daughters. Sometimes they go to movie theaters, but other times they just stay at Walter's place watching stuff at his home cinema. They usually have to go to another town in order to catch a specific function of some weird movie, so it's normal for them to come back very late. They eventually started doing stuff outside of watching movies, like going out for dinner. Walter invited all of us, including the kids, to go with him to a restaurant that a friend of his owned, but I said no because it was too expensive. I don't like that kind of place because I feel that they're a waste of money, and I didn't think the kids would enjoy it either. I insisted on staying with the kids and let the 2 of them go be themselves. This has become a regular thing, and it's now, in a way, a good deal for me because Walter pays for my wife's dinner and she can't no longer complain about me not taking her to fancy restaurants. As both their movie and dinner nights had become so common, I've grown a little tired of the burden of constantly babysitting. I talked to my wife and Walter about it, and he explained that he usually does not like leaving his daughters with babysitters. He says he's really comfortable knowing that they're being watched by an experienced father like me instead of some teenager. He nevertheless agreed that it was too much of a load for me and offered to start paying me a standard babysitter fee each time he goes out with my wife. I thought that was a fair approach to the issue, but my wife was fully against it. She says I should not be paid for babysitting my own daughter, nor the daughters of a close friend and our family like Walter. We've been arguing about this, but she insists on this notion and it's not open to change. She even gets mad every time I talk to her about it. Walter promised me that he will convince her, but he does not seem to have been able to do so either. Am I the jerk? You're the jerk for several reasons. 2 of which are calling taking care of your own kid babysitting and not really caring about your marriage. Don't be surprised if your wife ends up leaving you for Walter if they're not already having an affair. I'm sorry, OP, but it looks like your wife has a new husband, and somehow you're the babysitter. I kept reading this thinking this must be a joke. You're the jerk for asking for babysitting money, but this whole situation is so bizarre. I think you need to figure out if you want to be married and if she does, because right now, it doesn't seem like you are. To clarify, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a friend of the opposite gender who shares a hobby. The issue is, OP is refusing to participate in any aspect of his wife's interests or fill her romantic needs, letting Walter fill the whole vacuum of his neglect. Won't compromise and join them on any of the movies, even infrequently. Won't take his wife to a nice dinner because he thinks treating his wife to something nice occasionally is a waste of money. Insists on staying home when invited to join in non-scary movie activities, then whines about babysitting. Doesn't suggest any alternative group activities that they all might enjoy. So, judging by the content of this post, he's just encouraging his wife to go to Walter for all of her emotional and social needs. No way that could ever backfire. Your wife is dating your neighbor, and you think he should pay you? Oh man, you're the jerk. Walter and your wife might have a common interest, but they've tried to involve you in things outside of that, like going out to eat, and you refused. And now you're complaining about sitting at home and moping and babysitting, which you chose to do? Also ticking the box of taking your wife out for a nice dinner by letting someone else do it? You're the jerk. You're the jerk for basically outsourcing your wife to the neighbor, You don't like scary movies? Okay. But to then say that it's great that another man is taking your wife to what is basically dates so you don't have to? The answer is to try to engage in your wife's interests and find stuff you two can do together, not to start taking a salary to watch the kids. You're the jerk. It's not babysitting, it's being a parent. Also, are you aware you're pushing your wife into the arms of another man? You're the jerk, and you're basically asking your wife's boyfriend to pay you so he can date her. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his wife? Please let us know. What would you do if I wanted to go to the movies with another man, Reddit boy? Enjoy the peace and quiet while you're gone? How dare you! Am I the jerk for selling my house and not renewing the lease of a family with a sick kid? I, 47 male, inherited a property from my father 11 years ago. For the past 5 years, I've been renting the house to a nice family with a kid who's 5. They've been great tenants and there haven't been any issues. A month ago, I was approached by a realtor about selling my property. He had a buyer who was interested and was ready to offer $60,000 over market price because of the location. This was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. My tenants have a lease through mid-March. I've always renewed every year around this time. I contacted the husband, Michael, and let him know that I would not be renewing this time. To say that he was upset was an understatement. It turns out that he and his wife are currently in hospice with their son, who has a terminal heart condition. The doctors have given him a month or 2 to live. I knew that he was sick, but I never knew it was so serious. Michael told me that there's no way right now that they can pack up the house and find a new rental in time. The hospice where they are currently in residence is over 3 hours away, and he thinks it's terribly unfair that I expect him to sacrifice any of the time he has left with their son in order to move. He called me a heartless sociopath. I suggested that they have a family member take care of their packing and find a new place, but the only family they have around is the wife's elderly father. I'm not sure that I believe this because they're too young to only have one parent between them, and I'm sure there are siblings somewhere. I then suggested they hire a moving company to handle the packing and try to find a rental online, or possibly an Airbnb for a while. He claims he can't afford a moving company because of his son's medical expenses. I feel bad about the situation and realize I'm making things harder for them, but it's not my responsibility to take care of them. I've given them the legally required notice. My wife thinks that because of the money I'll be making, that I should offer to pay for a moving company and an Airbnb after they leave the hospice. I don't want to do this because it would cost me a big chunk of the profit from selling the house, and again, their situation is not my responsibility. This is the risk people take when they rent. My wife is now giving me the cold shoulder. So, am I the jerk for selling my house and not renewing the lease of their family? Edit. The purchase agreement has been signed. I'm not selling to a developer, but to a family that needs to move to the area for their son's schooling. I'll call the buyer and explain the situation, and then, if they choose, they can contact the tenants and make arrangements. It's a tough call. In terms of business, I get it. Greed is a thing. But you can't blame your wife for seeing you differently. You just showed her your true character. Going with my heart, you're the jerk. I'm with you here. It seems evident that as soon as money is in OP's hands, everything else falls by the wayside, including a family going through a hard time. A family that, as OP said, have been really good tenants. I don't think an Airbnb and a moving truck will dent OP's wallet that hard. There's being frugal, then there's being greedy. I've got a few properties, and from a business perspective, you learn that looking after a good tenant is long-term financially the best strategy. If the buyer is so keen, explain the situation and just ask him or her to wait a few months for the sale. I'm guessing if the kid sadly does end up passing, the parents will want to move out anyways. I vote you're the jerk. You're the jerk. You aren't making things harder for them. You're potentially making them miss time with their kid who won't be here for much longer. You are well within your right to do so and probably won't give it another thought once the money hits your bank account. It sounds like your wife is a different kind of person, and good for her. Also, people aren't taking a risk by renting. They probably just haven't inherited homes from their rich daddies. Your humanity only costs $60,000. Good to know. You're the jerk. You could have told them your intent before selling, but instead you let greed lead you. Great, you made $60,000 at the expense of another family. I was a landlord, and when we wanted to sell our place, we told our tenant first, gave them the option to buy first before we even listed the place. Well, what do you think? Is OP the jerk or not? Please let us know. Don't make others uncomfortable? About 10 years ago, I worked in a team of scientists when one day our boss told me others perceived me as contemptuous. I was shocked beyond words. I certainly did not feel superior or feel contempt for anyone. I was so flabbergasted, I was silent for probably 2 solid minutes. I asked for an example of when I said something I had said or had done that gave someone that feeling. He said he couldn't divulge that information. Okay. Then I asked for an example he had experienced or observed himself. He said he had none. I said, since I have no clue what I've done, how am I supposed to adjust my behavior? He said he didn't know. I said, basically then, I just need to not talk? He said he wasn't sure. I knew right then what to do. I'm pretty introverted, and as a kid, I didn't talk for years. I rarely spoke until I was about 13 years old. Got lots of notes from teachers about how quiet I was. I would answer questions when directly asked, but rarely spoke otherwise. So, my malicious compliance in this situation was easy for me. I just stopped talking except when asked a question. I made a point of smiling, showing I was listening, nodding in agreement, etc. I was extremely polite and agreeable. Pretty soon, some big issues came up that I had specific knowledge about. I knew how to solve them, but no one else asked. A huge conflict came up between 2 of our labs because one group wanted it one way and the other group had a different opinion. They fought and fought. People were having secret meetings in their offices to try to win. And when they finally arrived at the action they chose, it was wrong. In fact, both groups were wrong, and the whole experiment failed. It's important to note that no one was hurt. No property was damaged or anything like that. Just a lot of wasted time and expense on materials. But I never said a word. This went on for 3 weeks. The lab's budget had to be revised. They had to cut travel expenses, which I was okay with because I didn't want to travel anyway. So, no conferences for anyone. This is a big deal for a lot of researchers because it's how we gain notoriety to be able to get grants, among other things. Finally, a colleague asked me why I hadn't spoken for so long, why I was so quiet. Was something wrong? I explained about being told others perceive me as contemptuous. She had the same expression I did when I was told. She said she didn't believe anyone had said that about me. I honestly was surprised again because I believed our boss. Then she asked me what I thought about the experiment design and why it was failing. I told her about the solution I believed would work, which was actually surprisingly simple. She recognized it had a good chance of succeeding and asked me to share the idea at the next department meeting. At that meeting, she asked me again in front of everyone, and I repeated what I told her. Several people asked why I hadn't spoken up sooner. I explained I had been given feedback that indicated I caused others to feel uncomfortable. The whole table of colleagues also looked at me stunned. I said I was committed to not causing such bad feelings and couldn't figure out how to communicate because the feedback didn't give me any specific guidance. Everyone looked at the director at that point, and he said, "We shouldn't discuss personal issues." Ha! It was my issue. So I said, if anyone here perceives me as contemptuous and said as much to our boss, that's the reason I haven't been talking. If you don't feel that way about me, let me know, and I will stop being silent. Someone else said we needed to hold a vote so there wouldn't be any more confusion or talking behind anyone's back. They voted 100% for me to talk normally and that they didn't agree that I was ever contemptuous. That director slowly stopped coming to work, month by month after this episode, until he was only showing up 1 day a week. Finally, he took a lab position somewhere else, and one of my colleagues was promoted to director. And the experiment was a success. The next year, I got a grant to keep the research going and paid for 2 people to be able to travel to the related conference to present our findings. Am I the jerk for causing a scene when my husband's family showed up for dinner again? This evening, I made a scene in front of my husband's family while they ate dinner at our house. My husband's family came over for dinner the second time this week. They were also over last week and the week before. Typically, I'm not consulted on these visits. I'm just informed of them, sometimes with little or no notice at all. The visit 2 weeks ago, I had 30 people. This one, I had lots of notice. Last week was 15. During these previous visits, I feel I was a good and welcoming host. I made food, cleaned up, made conversation, etc. This afternoon, I was exhausted and not feeling well after a really busy work week and sleep issues. My husband and I have a young daughter who also came home from daycare coughing. We've been dealing with bouts of sickness, plus some really big transitions in the last few weeks. Around 3 p.m., my husband informed me that family members were coming over, 6 in total. I told him I wasn't feeling well and was upset he didn't ask me about it before confirming. I was also upset because we had only had one dinner together this week. The previous night, he had been at a work dinner and was over at his dad's earlier in the week, plus we had already had the family. He initially disregarded me and left the room, but he later apologized and reassured me that next week would be quiet and we would spend time together and I could just be upstairs tonight and not have to worry about cleaning anything up. Plus, dinner was taken care of already. I had an early dinner with my daughter and put her to bed at 7, which is when his family showed up. I stayed upstairs in bed initially, but went down and briefly explained I was not feeling well and our daughter was sleeping. However, there was a lot of noise with kids running around who woke up my daughter, so I went down again around 9. At this point, my husband was slurring his words drunk because when he gets together with his dad, they drink. When I realized he was slurring his words, I lost it. I asked him to stop drinking in front of his family because he would be grumpy and hungover the next day. I told him I was tired of it and tired of cleaning up after everyone. Honestly, I can't remember everything I said because I was raging, but I do know that I didn't swear or yell, though I was raising my voice. I told him that his behavior was unhealthy and that it was not okay. I basically had a heated argument with him in front of his family, clearly making them feel uncomfortable. But they also knew that I was sick, yet stayed until after 10 p.m. while the kids ran around making noise. They stayed late earlier in the week too, and at that time didn't even offer any help. My husband and his dad are both passed out now. The other family and kids have left. I'm embarrassed that I lost my composure, but I'm also just so fed up. I feel knots in my gut and guilt for not holding it in. But I feel like I've been holding a lot in, and I couldn't contain it any longer. Not the jerk. Your husband is an inconsiderate jerk. And not consulted? That is absolutely unacceptable. It's your house, and these things need to be agreed on before being planned. But the part that really infuriates me is, if these are his dinners and gatherings, and he refuses to even include you in the planning, or even agreement to have people over, why are you cooking for and cleaning up after them? Why on earth isn't he taking care of the food and cleanup? Also, getting drunk constantly at family dinners is a huge red flag to me. Probably because my father's side of the family has a lot of alcoholism, and they're the only people I know who do exactly that. Not the jerk. Maybe this is a cultural thing, but I absolutely cannot imagine in any world where people would need to be told that staying late and being loud when one of the two adults who owns the house is in bed sick. You shouldn't have to have these conversations with your husband. You shouldn't have to ask for basic consideration and respect. Am I the jerk for telling my son to get over the divorce? My ex-wife, Natalie, and I had an amicable but not loving marriage. We had 2 kids, Michael, who's 28, and Lily, who's 30. When Michael was about 10 years old, she and I saw that we no longer had romantic feelings, but a beautiful friendship. But for reasons at the time, mainly our kids, we decided to continue the marriage until our kids left home. Basically, nothing has changed on a daily basis. We still were the same couple as always, but we didn't force something we didn't want. When Michael moved away for college and home permanently at age 19, we decided to make the gradual move and finally make our divorce official. Michael didn't handle it well. For months, he tried to convince us to try couples therapy, intervention, that it was a bad phase in our marriage and not to sign the divorce paper until we were sure. We explained together and separately that it wasn't a bad phase and that we stay together for the good of the family only. Over time, he conformed, but hasn't accepted until today. I'm currently married and so is Natalia. We have a great relationship and often spend Christmas and New Year's together with our kids. What happened? Michael is engaged to Liam, and we recently had dinner with him, his in-laws, fiancé, and Natalie to celebrate the engagement. Michael still has a habit of making spiteful comments about the divorce and how traumatizing his parents' experience of getting divorced was. Several times I said that this was something that hurt us to hear because above all, my ex and I cherish that our kids don't suffer from our decision. During dinner, we were talking to his in-laws, and they asked how long we'd been apart and how good we had a relationship, etc. Michael at some point said, "It wasn't such a good thing for the family. It was a traumatizing experience to see your inspiration as a couple break up and your family fall apart." To say that Natalie and I were embarrassed that he said it in front of his in-laws is not necessary. I had my limit and I said, "Look, Mike, I understand your feelings, But it's been 9 years that your mother and I haven't been together, and you didn't even live with us during this process. We're already in another moment of our lives. I think it's time to get over it and turn the page." He was quiet and stayed that way for most of dinner, saying only what was necessary. Later, I got a text from him criticizing me, saying I should respect his feelings and he was just venting, which was a valid thing, and I shouldn't say that in front of his in-laws. Am I the jerk? If your son wants to vent, he needs to go to a therapist. What your son was doing was criticizing you in front of his future in-laws. That's not right, and you were very gracious in the manner in which you corrected him. Not the jerk. Not the jerk. Venting at such an event is not appropriate. He should seek the help he needs if he still can't accept the situation. You have a right to your own happiness, and you've made every effort to make the situation work. Not the jerk. It was an appropriate dinner conversation, but he brought it up first. 9 years is a really long time to not be able to adjust to a change made when he was an adult. Have you ever explained to Michael that you and your ex were only staying together for the kids for most of his life? He can't just attack you about a decade-old divorce every time you interact with him. That's ridiculous. You're the jerk. Because you said this, "We cherish that our kids don't suffer from our decision." But your son is suffering from it. You deceived your kids, playing the part of a happy marriage, and then shattered their worldview. It doesn't matter if it was for their own good, but it absolutely pulled the rug out from under them, and your son is suffering from it. Great, you're friends. Great, you're happy. But you don't get to tell your son how and when he has to deal with the trauma that you inflicted on him. Think of it this way. The moment he left home, you got divorced. You don't think that potentially made him feel responsible? That if only he had stayed or realized it earlier, you would still be married? Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his son? Please let us know. Am I the jerk for telling my sister-in-law she's no longer allowed in my house after telling my kids to give her money? A little backstory first. I'm 48, male. My sister-in-law, who's 45, moved in with my wife, myself, and our 3 kids, who are 18, 16, and 13, a few months ago, due to her being kicked out of her old place. I have a job that pays me well and allows me to spoil my kids, but they all know the value of $1. However, every week my wife and I give them $50 to spend on whatever they want as an allowance, and they can earn more by doing chores. My sister-in-law has a job that gives her enough income for her to live comfortably, and she's supposed to be saving some to get a new place while living with us. Well, last week my sister-in-law heard my eldest son talking to his mother and I about what chores he can do to earn $75, and she asked us if we actually gave our kids that much money and that it was too much money for kids to have. And we told her that they were our kids and we could give them however much we see fit to give them. I thought she dropped it, but I was wrong. Last night, my youngest son came to me and told me that his aunt had demanded he give her $40 from his money so she could go buy something. When he told her no, she apparently started screaming at him that he was an ungrateful brat and tried to grab his wallet and take the money. Immediately, I went to my 2 older kids and asked them if she had ever asked them or told them to give her money, to which my daughter responded that her aunt had asked her a couple of weeks beforehand if she could have $50, and my son told me that she had asked, but he had always shut her down immediately, telling her he was saving for a car. After hearing this, I went to sister-in-law and told her to get her stuff and get out of my house, and that she was no longer allowed in it if she thinks it's okay to steal money from my kids, yell at my kids, and call them mean names. My wife thinks I went about it the wrong way, but that I was overall right. But her family thinks I was a jerk for kicking her out and refusing to allow her in, and said that my kids should have just given her the money because family helps family. Am I the jerk for telling my sister-in-law she's no longer allowed at my house when she told my kids to give her money? Not the jerk. Toxic people don't have any right to stay in your life just because of your relationship to them. Penny wise, pound foolish. Years back, I worked in regional sales. My base was in Portland, but the job had me traveling to Seattle on a regular basis. We had a small branch there. It had been downsized, leaving me with the responsibility to manage their existing accounts. The business was on a long downhill slide, but that's a story for another day. When I made these monthly or so visits, the drive was far enough that it required an overnight stay. The unspoken rule was, stay somewhere decent but not extravagant. Knowing that the company was suffering a bit, I chose a national chain hotel that had several advantages. It was clean and safe, within walking distance of the branch office, offered a continental breakfast, and free parking. Free parking is not all that common at hotels in Seattle. We were also given a per diem for each of the 3 daily meals. I chose the hotel based on the fact that I would not need a breakfast and therefore saved the company money by staying in lodging that offered a free one. That worked out well for me because I'm not a huge breakfast eater, and when I was up there, I liked to maximize my time with branch personnel and our customers. I had to pack a lot into short 2-day visits. On one trip, I had to get up very early in the morning to begin a particularly packed day. I skipped both breakfast and lunch altogether. I simply didn't feel that I had the time to waste. Plus, Seattle is big, traffic is bad, and often there were many miles between customers. I'd started out at 7 a.m. and finished about 6:30 p.m. I was tired, but even more famished. I went to a nice, but not overly expensive place for dinner. When I got the bill, it was about $10 more than my per diem limit. I figured it was no problem since the total was only about 10% more and still far below the daily allowance for all 3 meals. About a week after I got back, the branch manager in Portland barked at me, "Come into my office." I hadn't a clue what I had done wrong, but the look on his face told me he wasn't pleased. He pulls out my expense report and says, "What's this charge for dinner? You know that's more than you're allowed, right?" I think he expected me to fall on my sword and beg for mercy for violating the policy. I did the opposite. I said, "DB, please understand that I never charge for breakfast, although I could. Also on the day in question, I skipped lunch as well. So the total, while above the limit, is still far below what I'm entitled to for daily meals." He grunted. He still wasn't happy. I continued, "I know the company is struggling. That's why I choose to stay where I stay. It's affordable, has free parking and free breakfast. If you look back, I've never charged the company for it, and only about half of the time for lunch." He knew I was right, but he decided to show me that he was the manager and that I had to adhere strictly to the rules. "Well, that's all well and good, but the per diem limits are clear, and you are never to exceed them again. I don't want to see another expense account like this on my desk ever again. Is that understood?" He peered at me over his glasses with a stern grimace. I said, "Perfectly," and left his office. From that day forward, I charged the maximum allowed per diem for each and every meal. Over the next several years, it cost the company many hundreds more than it needed to, but since reason and accounting skills weren't my manager's forte, I felt more than justified for strictly adhering to the rule and was a richer man for it.
Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video.
Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.